Hi, everyone. Welcome to our table talk with Pastor Jon.
Hey, everyone.
We're here and we're going to dig into our second week discussing word gifts.
Yes.
And I get the sense that this week is a little bit more about group gifts as opposed to personal gifts.
Yeah. Well, I think we talked about. It's sort of this is an odd moment.
Okay.
Because we talked a lot about what the spiritual gift of leadership looks like for the whole community, God-inspired vision, future direction, and how it's confusing because both you and I, for example, have the office or title of pastor, but that does not necessarily mean that we have that gift.
Right.
And if anyone does, it's him more than me. So like this is just like really, really important. So I spent a lot of time talking about the spiritual role of leaders in communities. And of course, the danger we've seen, I didn't talk about this in the message, is a lot of leaders that have fallen actually in the last 5 or 6 years have been so leadership driven. They were never with the sheep. It became isolationistic. I'm not just saying that. But leaders have God-given appointments to take movements and directions, where I would say that the pastoring gift is person-centric or small group-centric. So it's still group, but it's on the smaller side. And I just think, again, what we talked about, how I think I was saying, if you're a volunteer or part-time person, a volunteer you usually can shepherd 8 to 12 families probably well.
Right.
And if you're full-time, maybe up to 100 families, maybe. Because shepherds, they want to know your story, they want to love you, and they want to teach you on the ground, they want to baptize your family, they want to dedicate your children. And so understanding the difference between the gift of leadership and the gift of shepherding, I think would bring so much healing in churches, would adjust so many expectations. I think a lot of hurt in a lot of people in our groups who've left other churches, or even their expectations of this church, might get healed if they really have this conversation.
Sure.
And then evangelism can be group or individual.
Right.
It can be to the masses,
Right.
like Billy Graham, or it can be one-on-one, and it goes in a lot of different directions.
Right. Okay. So you started by talking about leadership, and it gets a little tricky because it's leadership or ruling. That's not a nice word for us anymore.
Well, it's not a nice word in our current day, but it's still true, because leaders are called to lead, and leadership means we're going there and not there. And it's funny, like, we all know this, right? Like, at the end of the day, God blesses godly submission, not dominance, not weird stuff, but like, at the end of the day, we have to wrestle down, has God appointed a leader or leaders in a community to take us somewhere? And we have to either say yes or no. So there's a submission piece, though that's been hijacked and misused by many, it still is true. And again, there's a deep need for hearing, because a lot of people lead churches or kingdom movements based on felt needs. What does the community need? Or this is a good strategy. But real spiritual leadership, I think at its inception point, is someone says, the Lord has asked me to do this thing. Moses, take the people out. And when we see that gift, we suddenly realize there's great weight and responsibility, but the hearing of the leader is very significant.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And a lot of people who think they're leaders aren't.
Okay.
A lot of people want to be leaders, but they're actually not called to actually be leaders.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they might be more shepherds.
Shepherds, or again, like the spiritual gift administration can be a high capacity leadership gift, but it's got to be a second chair one to the vision. Yeah.
And so pastoring is this awareness of the group.
Yeah.
And the care about the health of the group, and bearing that concern.
Yeah, concern, care, mentorship. I love the one phrase in the one definition: long-term spiritual responsibility for a group. And again, like I think the phrase I used was, leaders are like ranchers and shepherds are shepherds. Ranchers have multiple herds, where the shepherds are with one flock. And know their name and know what's going on, and there when difficult things happen, and are still teaching them. But it's, and again, I love how I was talking about, I think that one person who said that teachers are content-centered, pastors are person-centric, and sometimes shepherds have teaching, and that can go really well together, but not always. And so, yeah, there's, it's just a different responsibility in the whole of what God is doing.
Right.
Across the farm, if you want to use that illustration.
Right. So those are farm or ranch dynamics.
Yeah, sure.
And then the evangelist is the one that's out scouting for
new sheep.
New sheep, or the Mustangs to bring in.
And I just want to say, like, this is so, again, important. We are all called to evangelize, and we love Alpha here. What an incredible tool to empower us to witness well to our friends and see God work. And we've also done in the last year in our church, the 3 Circle training, how I can tell my story and how Jesus has done. But then there are so many, and they don't think they're evangelists. But evangelists, I wasn't able to unpack this fully in the sermon. I know so many evangelists, and it's like this deeply intellectual, academic thing where they defend the faith and persuade people, but when you listen to them, it's not just they're fighting an argument, they're desperate for someone to meet the one they're talking about. Other people, it's really simple, but the caveat is people with the gift of evangelist can't stop talking about the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. They're on a bus, they end up talking about it. They're on a plane, they talk about it. And the evidence is, even when you're afraid, you keep doing it when other people don't.
Right.
It's a snowblower thing.
Right.
You just keep going.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And where others may just be using the shovel, an evangelist comes in and has a snowblower.
Yeah, and I didn't share this in this sermon, but years ago, in our context, there was a person on staff, and again, saying this in humility, they weren't a great preacher. And actually, sometimes their theology wasn't great. I used to get really nervous when they preached. By the way, everyone breathe, I'm not looking at you when I'm doing this. But they had the gift of evangelism, and literally they could get up and say 5 words and sneeze, and all these people came to Christ. And I was like, what is going on? I preached this excellent sermon. It's much better theology. This person was younger. I was trying to mentor them. This person gets up and says, Jesus is awesome, and he's risen from the dead. You should, all these. I'm like, and I used to get really angry. And then I went, oh, Jon, you've taught on this. You're literally watching the snowblower versus the discipline. And Bill, I mean, you're here, you too. Like, I regularly, when I preach and teach, witness. I share the good news of Jesus. I invite people who do not know. But it is not empowered, not like other people.
Right.
Yeah.
And so today in our groups, we're going to be talking about the 3 gifts.
Yeah.
So leadership, shepherding, and evangelism. And we want to be discerning gifts in our midst. But we also want to be talking about the discipline.
Yeah, and I said this at the beginning of the message, and I want to say this again. A lot of the word gifts and power, a lot of word gifts and love gifts, we're all called to do as a discipline. We're all called to have mercy. We're all called to have faith. We're all called to give. We're all called to shepherd each other. We're all called to witness. So we need to just acknowledge, hey, that's not a gift for me, it's a discipline. And then say, Lord, help me to walk in that discipline. Because what we don't want, because this happened years ago in this church, was people were like, well, not my gift, so I'm not going to do that. And that becomes this weird excuse and not helpful.
Okay.
Not helpful.
Great. Well, we hope we've given you some ideas and spurred some conversation in your group. So may the Lord bless you as you meet together.
Yeah, thanks everyone.